Hey, what's up, Better Call Saul fans? Kino here, and we're back with another reaction. I definitely have a lot of thoughts on this episode, so we're gonna get to all of those. Real quick before we get into it, though, I wanted to do a little bit of, basically just addressing my last Better Call Saul reaction. I'm used to people, disagreeing with me about, my interpretations, disagreeing with me about my takes on the show. This is not new. It's been going on this whole season. And I'm totally fine with that, I'm totally cool if people disagree with me. I don't pretend that I, get every single facet or every single nuance of the show. I've only watched these episodes one time, so upon further rewatches, I might come away with a different interpretation. That being said, I still stand behind all the criticisms I've laid out. I think the cartel storyline is awful. I think it's a waste of time, and I'm especially going to talk about that in context of this episode because the cartel stuff is still taking away time from more important storylines that we need to be going over. But again, I don't mind if people disagree with me on the last episode, but I did want to address one facet of that, which is someone commented on the last video that it seemed like some of my criticisms were more directed at like the community than the show itself. Like I was more mad at people's reactions than to the material itself. And upon reflection, I think that's fair. I definitely think that so, constantly seeing all the praise for the show was getting under my skin a little bit because I'm like, why don't you see the flaws that I see? And I think that contributed to me being a little bit more mad in the last video than I probably would be. So in this one, I tried to set that aside and not think about any of that kind of stuff and just judge the episode for what it is. So just wanted to address that again. I stand behind everything I said. I'm being real. I'm not playing up my reaction for comedic effect or, to upset people or anything like that. But, I do think I want to basically be a little bit more fair to the show. So, that being said, I didn't like this episode either. I'm just going to come right out and say it. There were parts of it I liked, but man, was I disappointed in how they handled the big thing. So, this episode obviously deals with the aftermath of Howard's death. We see Mike and those guys cleaning up the body, and Kim and Saul going about their day. Eventually they have to go to Howard's, not funeral, but they're having a ceremony because the story is that he killed himself, even though they don't have a body. And so they have to go make an appearance there, and they convince his wife that he was on drugs. And then at the end of the episode, Kim breaks up with Saul, which I called that for a long time. Everyone was saying oh, she's gonna die or end up in jail or disappear, and I was like, no. If she met a tragic end, Saul would not be the character that we see in Breaking Bad. He was so happy-go-lucky, cheerful, a sleazy kind of character that I always knew that it was a reaction to her leaving him. Immediately from when we see them break up, we jump to the present time, and he's sleeping with a prostitute or some, just some maybe a bar girl he picked up or something. But the point is that without Kim to be keeping him kind of not classy, but keeping him, a respectable guy, he immediately, he jumped, to the opposite end, which is, full sleazeball, the Saul we know from the show. And I always knew that was going to be the director. I've talked about that in past reactions. So, that made sense to me. But the execution of it was not the way I wanted it at all. They literally, they get one scene at the end here, and she breaks up with him, and, more than half the episode was, dedicated to other stuff. And I was like, this is, the most important relationship in the show, and you're not going to dedicate a whole episode to this? It's just going to be, at the end here? yes, there are some scenes in this that of like him like looking upset about what happened, but that's not akin to dedicating an episode to exploring this, um, you know, dealing with the ramifications, all of that. It's just like it happens at right at the end, and then we cut ahead. No time left for Saul to for her to walk out of the apartment and have Saul have to sit with himself for a moment. No, we're immediately in the modern time, which is where we should have been from the start of this whole season. This should have happened at the end of the last season, and we should have had a whole season of him dealing with it and becoming the Saul Goodman from the show. It's like we're at the end here, and he's barely in his Saul Goodman persona. Yes, he's been using the name, but it's not, we've not seen him get there. He's just jumped ahead. Yeah, we've seen him set up the office, but, we haven't seen him actually dealing with clients. In the beginning, we see a little bit of a montage of him doing some stuff. We had the neck brace thing, but that's not akin to of him actually interacting with people, developing this persona, and actually stepping into the Saul Goodman role that we know from Breaking Bad. And I don't want to get off topic because a lot of people were also saying that my criticisms were vague and I'm not being specific. You guys understand this is just a reaction, right? This is meant to be a conversation I would have with a friend after I watched it. This is not a Breaking Bad log where I'm here's the clip of the thing I'm talking about and narrating over it. I just watched the episode, guys. I'm going to refer to events in a little bit of a vague sense, but I do think I'm coming through clearly. I think if you actually listen to what I'm saying, I think it'll make sense. But again, if I'm going off topic too much or switching topics too quickly, that might be what's confusing some people. But again, the main point that I'm trying to make about this is that they are not dedicating enough screen time to exploring Saul and Kim's relationship to make their breakup an effective emotional experience for me. They immediately cut away. I don't even have time to deal with the fact that she left him because we're immediately jumping ahead. Because they wasted screen time on the cartel stuff, on Saul, or not Saul, on Gus, on Mike. And I'm going to talk about their storylines because there is stuff I want to say. But I just think, God, this stupid cartel storyline is trying to be dramatic, but it's fundamentally not. The scene at the beginning of the episode, right, when Gus goes to meet with Don Eladio and Juan Bolsa and Hector, we know they're not going to believe Hector's accusation because we know what happens in Breaking Bad. This is not tense. Not if you actually put any kind of thought into it. None of the Lalo stuff really was. Because none of the Gus Mike storyline, they don't establish any characters who can die besides Nacho. And Nacho's death had a little bit of that, but they didn't have enough screen time, I think, to really flesh him out and make him be someone that we're really sad to see gone. Once Nacho's dead and Lalo's going after Gus, there's no one who I have to worry is gonna die. The only one kind of was Kim, but again, I knew that wasn't going to be the end because, again, I know the emotional state that Saul is in Breaking Bad, and that just doesn't make sense. So, anyway, so I wanted to touch a little bit on Mike and Gus's storyline in this episode. So, we have quite a lengthy scene of Gus talking with this guy, this wine guy, and the implication is that Gus is attracted to this guy. Now, let me just state categorically, Gus is gay. That is heavily implied in Breaking Bad. It's pretty much canon in my mind that Gus and Max, his partner in the flashback in the Hermanos episode, they were lovers. And the reason Gus hates the cartel and spent all this time plotting against them is because they killed his lover. We even have an episode in this show called Dedicado a Max, which we see the village in Mexico that Gus kind of erected in honor of Maximilian. So, don't have any kind of problem with Gus being gay. I wasn't like, oh my god, they're shoving like a gay scene down our throat. It's not. It's totally believable. My problem with that scene was I was worried that they were going to like basically have Gus have like a new little kind of boyfriend. And I was like, no. Gus's only love was Max. And when Max died, Gus dedicated his life to getting revenge on their killers. Like, Gus did not see anyone after Max. That is my interpretation of the character. Like, he was so in love with this guy that he was like, I will stop at nothing to avenge you and nothing else matters. So if I was worried that if I saw him being like, ooh, a new guy, ooh, I was like, it would ruin the impact that like Max's death had on Gus. It was the same thing, by the way, for if any of you guys are Game of Thrones fans, spoilers if you haven't seen Game of Thrones, but in the books, Renly Baratheon and Loras Tyrell are lovers. It's not explicit, but it's implied. And when when Renly dies, Loras joins the Kingsguard because he's like, I don't want anyone else. I don't want to be with anyone else. I loved him so much that like nothing can replace him in my heart. Compared to the show, which had Loras like banging dudes like everywhere, and it like cheapened Renly's death. And I thought the same thing here. Now, I kind of get what they were going for, that like Gus just wanted like a distraction for a little bit, and then once he kind of realized he was being attracted to this guy, he left. That's why he left abruptly. Again, it could be like showing that like, oh, he's still so in love with Max that when he realized, he was attracted to this other man, he left before anything could happen. And I get that, but even still, it's like kind of a waste of time. It's not a waste of time because, it's gay characters or anything like that. It's a waste of time because we don't need to see Gus like having any kind of romantic interest at all. You could argue that it humanizes Gus, but I don't think Gus needs to be humanized in this way. Gus is a villain of Breaking Bad. He is scary. He's like a machine. He's intimidating. We don't need to unpack him in this way. I would like to see more of his background. That would have been cool, and I'll talk about that in a later video. But yeah, I didn't need to see this kind of side of him, if that makes sense. Also, we got stuff with Mike. So we get another lengthy scene of Mike going to Nacho's father and telling him what happened to him. In not direct terms, but being like, hey, your son's not coming back. Now, again, this could have been an interesting scene because Mike is a father who lost his son, just like Nacho's dad lost his son. They have this kind of like shared experience that could have been interesting to explore. But the problem is they don't get enough time for this. Like, if you're going to do this, we need more time for you to establish a relationship and make the impact of the scene more impactful. Again, just one scene out of the blue like this is not satisfying because these characters don't have the kind of knowledge of each other. Like, immediately Mike has to go to this guy and be like, hey, I know you don't know me. Like, yeah, they met once, like, 3-4 seasons ago, years ago in the timeline. And it is like, hey, I know you don't know me, but your son's dead, and, I'm sorry, man. I know how that feels. And the guy has to be like, oh, you should feel bad because you're a gangster, blah, blah, blah. But, again, we need more time to establish this, but we don't have time because you're already, like, trying to balance all this other stuff on top of it. And yeah, this show lacks focus. Breaking Bad, I know you guys keep saying that, like, stop comparing it to Breaking Bad, but I have to, because Breaking Bad had a great amount of focus. Like, it only focused on the important things, and we didn't have scenes, like, filled with nothing. Or if it was filled with nothing, it was meant to highlight like some kind of like emotional tense moments, like again, like the Fly episode, which I'm going to review next on my Breaking Bad logs. It was a quiet moment to like reflect on the events that happened, and it contributed to everything that had happened, rather than just like Better Call Saul to me feels like, rather than having intentional slow moments, it's just not giving enough time to the important stuff. I hope that makes sense, and I hope I'm not rambling on completely, but I really stand behind these criticisms, guys. Like, I'm really disappointed in how this season has gone. It's not that the actual moments are bad. It's just that they're not given the proper setup or the proper follow through to make me really invested. There is an interesting detail. I'll give it credit for this. In the hotel that Kim and Saul stay at, you can see the painting that Walt saw in season 2 after his fugue state, and in season 5 with the when he's at the hotel with the neo-Nazis. Again, it's a painting of a sailor like sailing away from his family, and in Breaking Bad it represented Walt's growing distance from his family, and again that ties back into what we see with Saul and Kim. So great visual detail there, very subtle too. They don't a lot of times they draw attention to it in this show, but this callback they didn't. It was very subtle. I appreciate that. But like I said, I am disappointed, but I like this show, you guys. Like, please don't think that I hate the show. If I hated it, I wouldn't make videos about this series. Like, you guys are not going to see videos about, like, Stranger Things from me, because I just fundamentally don't like anything about that show. There's nothing worth talking... There's nothing worth criticizing for me, because I don't think there's anything really good happening. In this show, I loved the early seasons when it was focused on Saul, when he wasn't so much of like a background character to the fucking cartel. Man, this show was good. It had interesting relationships. Kim, again, is still an interesting character, but they just gave her this cheap kind of ending that didn't... Again, they might do more stuff with her in later episodes. We have like, I think like maybe 3 or 4 more episodes to go. But yeah, for me, there's just no real impact to these moments because the story is so distracted. But I hope I made sense, you guys. I hope you're taking away the right things from these videos. And if you disagree with me, I totally welcome that. You guys know me. You know I love great shows like The Sopranos, The Wire, Mad Men. So I can recognize talent in this show. I can recognize good writing, but I just feel like the execution's not as well done. And I also firmly believe that, like, once the hype of new episodes dies down and everyone's had a chance to sit with it, I think more and more people are going to agree with my assessment. I really do. I'm not saying I'm a genius or anything like that. Other people totally see the flaws in this too, but yeah, we'll just see how the story turns out. But regardless, I do look forward to making these videos every week with you guys, and stay tuned for more reactions coming soon.